Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, college recruiters aggressively go after out-of-state students. An article by Teghan Simonton at USA Today. Our question from a listener is two questions. Number one, should my child submit their COGAT results from before middle school? That's Ryan from Arizona. And what is the difference between Early Decision 1 and Early Decision 2? That comes to from Lori from New York. Our interview is with Lisa Keegan, the Vice President of Enrollment at Bucknell, on the importance of fit when selecting a college. That is part 1 of 2. And our college spotlight is the long-awaited SUNY Buffalo.
And friends, as Obama used to say, I'm fired up and ready to go. Remember you used to do that, Dave? I'm fired up.
Yep.
I'm fired up and ready to go. I've literally been back in the ATL about 9 hours after a sensational trip to the Research Triangle. For those of you who don't know, that's a nickname for the one of the most impressive places in the country, in my opinion, but a part of North Carolina that includes Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill, although those residents there would say in a different order, but that's like a little triangle area, that whole area. Visiting my daughter, who's doing extremely well in grad school. So proud of you, Joy. And fun. Got to meet 3 of our listeners for the first time, which is always special. Shout out to Kim, Vince, and Gina. Got to also meet several of my students who are in college, which is always a highlight of any trip. And Lisa and I got to hang out on the campuses of Meredith College, NC State, Duke, and UNC. We got to talk to dozens of students. So we are going to be jointly doing some spotlights, particularly on Meredith, NC State, and Duke. Now you're thinking, hey, what about UNC? We're the flagship. Well, we only had breakfast with the UNC parent and lunch with one of my students and spent some time on campus, but we didn't do the deep dive that we did on Meredith, NC State, and Duke. But I'll be back, and we will definitely get to UNC. So look for spotlights coming up pretty shortly because we want to do it while it's fresh on Meredith College, NC State, and Duke. But Dave, you ready to dive in with the admissions tip?
I am ready.
All right. So it's always questionable for people, like, when do I submit? When do I not submit? My test score I'm referring to. In general, you hear the rules. If your test points are at the midpoint of the 25th to 75th reported average, then you want to submit. But there's so many exceptions to this that it almost feels like bad advice. It almost feels like someone saying, give me a knife. And you're like, what kind of knife are we talking about here? I need a butter knife? I need a steak knife? What kind of knife? It's a blunt instrument unless you know more about what exactly you need. So my advice is just to simply ask admission officers. They oftentimes will welcome that. In fact, a lot of times they'll say to me in talking, if your student's not sure whether to submit, just let me know. Now, here's the thing. If your score is really bad, sometimes you don't want the admission officer to know. So one way of approaching this is to throw 3 scores out. You're just having a conversation and you say, could I ask you a scenario? If I had 3 different ACT scores, a 22, a 24, and a 26, would you recommend me submitting or not submitting? Now you might think, they're just going to know I have the low score. Well, not if you play it right. So it's a little more challenging now because you don't have the in-person fairs, the in-person info sessions like you used to, but there's still forums. There's still venues. There's online fairs. There's chats. There's virtual visits to your school. You can ask afterward at the very end, can I stay behind and ask you a question? So there's still ways of doing it. The bottom line is feel free to ask. They welcome it. Just ask in a little bit more of a coy way and you're good. All right, Dave. 3 in a row for you, my friend.
I'm on a hot streak.
The hottest ever.
Okay, going into October, I'm the hot pitching hand.
Okay, don't get the big head. Here is our word of the day. The word is soft. What does soft mean?
Soft. It's got to be like the same as soft when you're playing basketball, and this guy's just playing a soft defense, and you can take him to the rim because he just don't know how to cover you.
So who you taking to the rim in admissions, man?
Well, it just got to mean that maybe the candidate that you're doing is really not that tough, is not that good, that they're a little soft on some of their criteria, They're not like hard as muscle. They're more like, soft.
You are so full of it.
Their scores aren't quite up to par. Maybe their recommendations could be a little fine-tuning.
I'm not giving you credit for that.
Oh, I thought that was great.
You're in the realm, but it just was not. You were like that dull knife. I need that sharp steak knife that was just so soft. Soft is a term that does refer to being a little bit on the weaker side as an applicant. So
that's what I said. That's exactly what I said. That is exactly what I said. I said, soft, take you to the rim. Like you were weak, man. Like you're on the ball. Like
he didn't put it in admissions terms. Soft is like, it could refer to, man, this year's pool of, last year's word was pool, right? This year's pool of applicants from this school is just soft. And typically that would mean lower grade point averages, weaker curriculum, test scores a little off, or it could even be a more holistic things like teacher comments. Could be an extracurricular, just not involved in anything. Like the numbers are okay, but there's just not kids that I see having an impact. So overall, it refers to like a little weaker applicant pool than you typically like to see or normally see, or just compared to anybody else. Like couldn't even be unique for that school. You could just be saying, I want to visit the school again, but boy, the last 3 years, their applicants have been soft. So there you go, soft. See what happens is when you get on a winning streak, I have to up the standard of how I become a harder grader. I'm like a teacher.
I think I got that one, but I'll let you act up.
Okay. Okay, Dave. The big number. And the big number is 114,724.
Whoa.
And what that refers to is the national salary for the highest paid job right out of undergrad. Want to take a guess of what it is?
It's got to be computer science.
They were up there. They were in the list.
Either that or finance.
That was also up there. Both of those were up there. For top jobs. Computer science was 107,102. Economist 107,154. Software engineer 107,181. They were all up there. You know what it is?
Nursing.
And actuary.
Oh, wow.
Which is what Lisa's husband, Alan, does. Actuary, 114,724. People say, what's an actuary? Actuaries help maintain society's financial stability. They manage risks and determine the financial consequences of certain risks. Using mathematical and financial theory, they work alongside clients and businesses to create policies that help them minimize costs incurring those risks. So, use like Alan, her husband, has an engineering degree, right? But you combine they're math specialists that are oftentimes employed by like insurance companies. Like, for example, if you want to figure out what your price should be to 18-year-olds driving sports cars with, getting licenses, use the actuary to go crunch the math and do the math models and come back to you. So there you go. Fun fact.
In other words, Lisa's husband was responsible for you getting double your insurance rates when you got a crash.
Don't be hating on Lisa. How many times has she said, I don't have a math brain? She's got the Anika no math brain over there. Alan's her calculator.
Blame your husband for your higher insurance rates when your teenager starts to drive.
Dave just wants to meddle this morning. All right, man, let's get to the article, guys. See, you're up to no good. You're a menace today.
That's right. Throwing some shade.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Okay, our article, college recruiters aggressively go after out-of-state students from Teghan Simonton of USA Today. This article says that more than 240 public universities admitted fewer in-state students in 2017 than 5 years earlier, and 46 of these colleges are down over 10%. And the marquee college that they highlighted, the Crimson Tide, the University of Alabama, whose proportion of out-of-state enrollment increased 28% from 2012 to 2017, such that today out-of-state enrollment at the Tide constitutes 70% of all of their freshman student body, giving Alabama one of the most geographically diverse campuses in the nation. But they are not alone. The University of Maryland is up 37%, Tennessee State is up 41%. And to quote this article, every state in the United States has become a battleground for a university sparring to attract the most geographically diverse population, recruiting on each other's home turf and offering merit scholarships that compete with in-state tuition. So for college students, this is both a blessing and a curse. For the first time, they have greater geographic advantages, greater prospects for new experiences and financial savings, but curse because it also disadvantages many of them in their own state. So before I throw this up for discussion, we'll talk about briefly what are the reasons why. Well, number one, it's a demographic cliff. We've talked about this before. We have declining enrollment everywhere. In Alabama, for example, there are 1,000 fewer SAT test takers in 2017 than 2012. Number two, every school wants to expand their enrollment as a sign that they have a visible measure of success. Number three, out-of-state kids pay more money. We've talked about that before. And number four, with social media and digital recruiting platforms, it's easier than ever for recruiters and for kids to move beyond their state boundaries. So what say you, Mark?
I say that you are fantastic at Mr. Being in the News, dude. I have to shout you out. You're on. I've said this before, friends, but Dave sends me multiple articles every week. So even when we're not doing this, he's always thinking about these topics. And really good ones. He finds ones that at times I don't find. But you really summarize these articles really, really well. And so I just don't want to need to give. I gave you shade. Now I need to give you love. Make up for
In other words, man, I ain't soft.
There you go. You ain't soft. That is so true. I like it. You ain't soft. All right. So I know we've talked about this before. This article comes with numbers, hardcore numbers, individual schools. It gives you numbers in terms of the percentage of increase out-of-state recruitment. It also gives you numbers in terms of the number of regional admission officers that colleges are hiring. Just so you know, so this has been a trend that's been growing where normally, traditionally, what you did was everybody worked from the home base. Or I won't say everybody. There have been regional admission officers for a long time, but it's been a small number. A school might have 3, or 2 or 4. And now it's been this growth. And what's a regional admission officer? Well, I'll give you an example. I was talking to the University of Miami, and they said, we don't think we're doing as well in either Atlanta or Chicago as we should be. We're like, we get just crazy number of applicants all up the East Coast. But Chicago and Atlanta should be really hot markets for us. So we're putting a regional there. This is a true story. We're putting a regionals. So they're telling me about who my regional is, get together with the regional, which of course I've done a few times, and then Chicago as well. And so what regional admission officers, they're very effective because they live locally. So I remember I was having a meeting with the University of Alabama at Birmingham, which is a different school. They're both the University of Alabama. They're very different schools who run completely differently. And this meeting at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, regional admission officer was just me and the admission officer and 2 students. And did a little presentation to 2 students, and we stayed around and talked afterward. And he basically said, hey, listen, if you guys didn't get what you want, I'm around the corner. So you've got my number. Here's my cell phone. We can always meet at Starbucks for coffee anytime. And so this is what they do, right? And they'll meet parents. They'll meet students. They're always accessible. They're usually very personable. They're the same kind of people that Fortune 500 companies would hire for sales jobs. But they just have that humanitarian edge where they want to help people. So they're very good. They're very likable. They're very personable. And this article, it actually uses the term, and I agree with it. It says there's a new arms race now. In times throughout the decades, Dave, different arms races occur, right? Like there's the arms race for the best student center that's out there. You got to have the rock climbing wall and this every imaginable perk you could ever think of, from the game centers to video playing game. I mean, all of that. Then you see the dorms, then you go to the football stadium. Those are facilities arms races, right? And then I remember when we had Emily Griffin from Amherst on, and I interviewed her about career centers. She's like, it's almost becoming the new arms race, the best career center, which was a good thing, by the way. But so these things happen, and basically arms races means that one school starts doing it, starts having a lot of success. And then, I mean, what's the whole saying, Dave? Something like imitation is the most sincere form of flattery or something like that?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody's looking at their competitors and saying, wow, how did your numbers go up and mine went down? So what did you do that I didn't do? What are you doing that I can implement? And of course, that happened a lot when it came to direct mail and all that back in the day. That was the big, huge thing. Now, this is one of the arms races, and it's actually incredibly effective. Let's first of all look at the need it addresses. Well, one of the things, of course, we've mentioned is decreased financial resources going from the state coffers to the school. We talked about that several times. As budgets get cut in the state, higher ed gets cut. Colleges still need to survive, so you look for additional sources of revenue. International students, that became a big arms race, going after the international students, going after domestic people that can pay. So, but think about how naturally this is set up. So the school needs money, right? And where do you get it? You get it from tuition-paying parents that can pay triple the cost of in-state. But you incentivize those parents with merit scholarships. So now it's softer on their money. You don't have to pay triple. Let's say in-state's 10, out-of-state is 30. Well, you throw them a $12,000 scholarship. So one, they get that sense of feeling good. Their kid got a scholarship. There's a nice pride feeling about that. The kid feels good about who they are. Your wallet also feels good. So that's kind of appealing, both money and honor. You're appealing both to your pocketbook and to your ego. And then you've got somebody personal and warm around you, making you feel like the school is so warm and fuzzy. And I'll tell you, Dave, I was in California visiting colleges 2018. And I was going up, it was it wasn't just one part of California. Like we started in Southern California and then we were all the way up in the Monterey Bay area, all that way up there. And I met 3 different people on this trip, and their kid was at the University of Alabama. And I'm like, whoa, but what is it? It's Alabama strategically has had more regionals than anybody else, 44. And that came from me talking with one of their admission officers, told me they had 44. So everybody else has sort of copied Alabama. They tried to copy Alabama, and especially in the South. Now, Georgia just has not been interested in that at all. Georgia Tech, none of the Georgia schools have done it. But it's huge with South Carolina. It's huge with Tennessee, Maryland, and other states as well.
We know why Georgia isn't as interested. It's because they have more than enough to handle with Atlanta and everybody moving to Georgia. So they
but you brought up a really good point, which is it's not only the fact that your state is cutting you off or they're decreasing what you're getting, right? We've talked about this before. Ever since the great financial crisis in 2008, money has not returned to the same numbers only in about a handful of states. That's part of it. The other is declining demographics. And this article talks about it. So states like Alabama, they're experiencing less students, less graduates, and schools get creative too. Like the article talks about a special scholarship that Maine has.
Yeah.
And more schools are doing things like waiving out of state. And so, but it's very, very appealing. And especially, the model Alabama's done, it's actually a very effective model. It's not easy to pull off, but which is have incredible sports success. And then you can promise kids a great education at a flagship school and big time fun.
Yes.
That's very appealing to teenagers. That's the idea a lot of people have of the college experience. Yeah, I get education that's going to prepare me to come out and be an actuary and make $114K out of college. But I also get to tailgate and hang out, and they see the crowds and cheering and everybody going crazy with the face paint, and that just feels like fun in the college experience. And so that's the model, and imitation the most sincere form of flattery. South Carolina is attempting to do it. And the article also talks about something interesting, which is schools are now realizing that it's so competitive that they're starting to try to hire their own in-state people to play defense. It's almost like play defense, right? Because people are constantly coming in and trying to poach kids from your state. So you better have a good plan to keep your kids in state because they're coming into your turf. And one of the brilliant things Tennessee did is offer free tuition for community colleges. That makes it hard. Some of the things like Florida and South Carolina and Georgia have done is have such incredible, generous programs for in-state students that, it's very difficult for them to leave. But here's a quote from the article that I really like. Let me read it. Every state in the USA has become a battleground for universities sparring to attract the most geographically diverse population, recruiting on one another's home turf, and offering merit scholarships that compete with in-state tuition. For college-bound students and their parents, this can mean opportunity, greater prospects for new experiences, and financial savings. It also can mean being put at a big disadvantage in their own home state, because obviously your own home state becomes a lot more competitive. But that's the other thing. You get to sell new experiences. You get to sell the diversity of living somewhere else and trying something new, which is very appealing to both students and parents. And, you also can sell the diversity of your student body. I mean, I try to tell people, Alabama is not the Alabama people think it is. 5 of the last 6 years, over 60% of their kids have been out of state. It's one of the most geographically diverse flagships in the country. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that if you're Alabama, you thank the lucky stars you got Nick Saban.
I know. Well, it's been easier for them.
It has. I mean, what are they up to now? Is it 6 national championships?
I think it's 6 or
decade?
7. I can't even keep track.
7?
That's when you know you're high when you can't keep track.
That's right. And every so often I'll tune into an Alabama game, and they're number 1 against number 8, and I turn it off by the second quarter when they're already up by 5 touchdowns.
I mean, it's true. Although this year, I think Georgia can give them a run. I mean, Georgia and Alabama are the only two schools in the country that have number 1 votes by in both polls, by both the writers' poll and the coaches. So it's like 2 schools that have separated from everybody. We'll see if we can take them down.
Oh wow! So hats off to Alabama for really being able to leverage its athletic success into some true academic achievements. And the other school that was very successful doing that was University of Miami, who completely turned themselves around from sort of this party school. What I think the big thing was when they were playing Notre Dame, and it was the what was that term, the felons versus the
yeah what was it? I know what you're talking about. I'll think about it. I'll pop in my head.
But bottom line, they were all these crazy felons, and they had these great players like Michael Irvin and so forth, and then
showing her age, Dave.
John O'Shalala, someone totally turned that school around. They're still good. They still won another national championship, but now they're a complete academic powerhouse with football definitely in the secondary. But great way to leverage their athletic success into greater geographic diversity and academic achievement. So
another thing, this article didn't talk about it, but Alabama literally, Dave, has increased its student body by almost 15,000 students.
Wow.
So, and over 40% of them had a 30 on the ACT, which is like up from about 21 or 22 15 years ago.
That's right. Oh, Catholics versus convicts. That's
There you go. There you go. Thank you. That was bugging me.
Notre Dame were the Catholics and Miami was the convicts.
Yeah, well, Miami went to an extreme because Jimmy Johnson win by any all means necessary, and so then that academic people had to come in and rein that thing in, and so that's what happened there. But they still benefited. You know, the whole publicity, all publicity is good publicity. I mean, it still got their name out there. But the other thing is, when you think about how much money you're bringing into the coffers, not just by getting significantly more tuition dollars, but increasing your student body size.
That's right.
Like, that's where the real money is. This is one of the reasons why I always felt a lot of schools would respond to the lost revenue in the pandemic by just increasing their size. And by the way, Dave, we probably need to come back and address this because that's happened. Like, I'm seeing more people who can't get dorms right now and more people who can't get classes because schools countered the pandemic by just increasing their school size, their class size, their incoming class. So we'll probably try to find a really good article on that and come back, because that'd be a really good that'd be another good conversation to have. But you know, one of the things that you have told us in the surveys that you guys like for us to talk about trends, and this is a big trend. This is a big trend, and it's been going on for a while now, which is hire regional recruiters and prioritize your out-of-state recruitment, throw merit scholarships at people, promise big-time sports and fun in addition to great academics, and promise a new experience living in another part of the country, as well as a very diverse student body. You get a diverse student body. We have students from this state and that state and this place and that place, and look at our out-of-state. All of those things are appealing. And the other thing that's the trend now is schools watching their back at who's coming into their turf and beefing up in-state programming in a way to counter getting raided. Because look, you don't want to lose tons and tons and tons of in-state as you go out of state. And by the way, the other trend is the tension that this is starting to create, especially in states that have really competitive flagships, right? So, for example,
UC.
Well, I'll give you another example that I haven't talked that much about here. There was so much debate, consternation, angst, controversy when the University of Michigan, fairly recently made the decision that they were going to go from basically being about 2/3 in-state school down to 51%. So they want to stay at 51 to say the majority of people are coming from Michigan, right? But that's a pretty big, that's a lot of people if you go from about 2/3 to 51%. And some of you from the Michigan area, Dave, you know the school, the Cranbrook School.
Yes,
Cranbrook
absolutely.
School, right? Really fine school, a private school. And this is a school that would have 150 kids in the senior class that would apply to the University of Michigan. And I was talking to people in their college counseling office, and did they ever feel it overnight how their kids were just not getting in Michigan anymore? So you can imagine the blowback that then happens when parents, some of whom are high-powered, say, I've been paying a lot of state taxes for a very long time for you to reject my kid to go after greener pastures and someone who can pay more. So that creates a credible amount of tension. And you really, really see that in places that have real competitive flagships, like California, like Michigan, like Virginia, like North Carolina, I could go on and on. Georgia, it's very interesting talking with Rick Clark about this, director of mission at Georgia Tech. So Georgia actually is a state that doesn't have any state legislated mandates in terms of like the Michigans. The Texas is another one. Oh my goodness, the controversy there. Didn't mention them. One of the most competitive states to get in their flagship. They don't have any state regulated mandates like those other states do. But Rick said to me, you think I'm crazy? I know the kind of blowback we'll get if we can't get anybody in state. So they did a number of very, very smart things. One, they said, we will take 60% of our population will come from Georgia. We're not changing that number. We'll go 30% out of state. We'll go 10 international. But we want Georgia to know that we're a state school. You're going to have 60% of our spots. Then they actually created their own separate round of early action just for Georgia residents with an October 15th deadline. And then there's a November 15th early action 2 round for the rest of the country. All of these things to signal to in-state families, like, we still know that you're our bread and butter. So there's another trend, is this incredible tension that this move is creating in states that have really competitive admission processes. So final thoughts.
No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you want to have a national exposure as a college, you got to have a national recruiting pool. And if you're in a state where you don't have as many students, you've got to go out of state. And if you can use your athletic success to further your national academic brand, all this makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a win-win for all, quite frankly. I mean, yes, you might have less opportunities in your own state, but remember, there's 49 other states in the union.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is schools are not only using their athletics. Like, people are looking at whatever angle they have, right? And so if you're located right around a beautiful bay and ocean, you're like University of South Florida. I mean, hey, you're going to talk about your marine biology program. Miami's got an absolutely incredible marine biology program, but that's a private school. You're going to use whatever assets you uniquely have that can make you competitive. That's what you use, right? I mean, if you're University of Alabama, Birmingham, you're going to talk about your incredible medical program and everything medical related, and how much of a powerhouse you are, because you are. You're going to use that to your advantage. So we talked a lot about athletics today, but it's actually, you take a look at what are my unique assets and strengths that play nationally, and that's what you lead with. Because if you're in Alabama, Birmingham, you're not talking football, okay? You can't hang. So you got to use what you got. You got to play your strong hand.
Right.
Awesome. So it's just a trend. This is a little bit more of a trend to be aware of. It may impact you because as a student, you may get all kinds of out-of-state opportunities, and there might be a lot of nice financial strings attached to them. But I'll tell you one thing. This is a basic, simple takeaway, Dave. Don't look at the sticker price. Look at net price. Look at what you pay after free money. Don't just assume, out of state, we can't afford it. You actually maybe can. One other thing I'm seeing schools do, I'm seeing schools come up with more creative ways to get students in-state tuition sooner than you may think. Not all, but some. Right. So awesome. All right, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Don't go soft on me this week.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, friends, after a hiatus for a week or two, we are back to our endowment countdown. One thing I do want to point out about endowments is some schools, endowment at one school is not exactly the same as at another school, because in some cases, especially when there's medical schools, sometimes there's more like designated money given, and people have allocated money like to go toward the hospitals. And so it's, endowment per student is as good a metric as we can sort of find to go with, but it's not perfect, as an indicator. All right, we are in the top 60. Number 59, Denison University, and that is in Ohio. 58, second choice for Karis, Scripps College, Claremont, California. 57, Middlebury College. And of course we had Sam Prouty come on from Vermont and do on that, a special segment for us. 56, St. Louis College of Pharmacy. 55, back to the Claremont colleges again, Harvey Mudd College. 54, Colby College in Maine. 53, Earlham College in Indiana. 52, Haverford College, Haverford, PA. 51, Wabash College, one of 3 all-men's institutions. And so now we're still at the point where we're in the 300-some thousand per student, But at number 50, Whitman College, $395,000 per student. So we're getting close to $400,000 per student. Any thoughts on any of those, Tannen? Lisa?
Well, I think that, they're all amazing schools, and you can start to see why. I mean, they really just can invest a lot of resources in their students to provide them with all the different programs and opportunities. So, it's definitely something you opened my eyes to really look at in terms of college selection.
Yeah, for private schools in particular, when they're not getting that state money. I've worked at 2 schools in my life, and one had a huge endowment per student, and one was completely tuition driven. And I just saw what we were able to do with resources. It made such a huge difference. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about it, because I've been at 2 institutions, one with a big endowment and one without one. And also I did fundraising for a year, and I was involved in this stuff. So anyway, that's it. But we have a lot to cover. And thanks to you guys, I think we have about 30 questions in the kitty right now. And really good ones are coming in on the survey too. So there's even more if we tally them up. And so one of the ways we're going to handle this is by trying to, when it's a shorter type question, we're going to try to bang it out quickly. And so today we're doing 2. And so do you have the question in front of you or not, Lisa?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you read the question and we'll dive in.
All right. So the first question of the week is, should my child submit their COGAT results from before middle school? And this is from Ryan, a dad in Arizona.
Yeah, and I think in order to answer that, we need to let people know what COGAT is. So COGAT is just like COG stands for cognitive, the A stands for ability, and T is for test. So COGAT is just about COGAT. So it's the cognitive abilities test, and it's a test that's administered K-12. It's actually published by Riverside Insights, and it's designed to test students' reasoning and problem-solving skills through a series of what they call 3 batteries. There's a verbal battery, a quantitative battery, and a nonverbal battery. And it's designed to predict achievement scores. And so this is not a new test. This actually was originated in 1954. So it's been around for a while. And it's designed to test both English and non-English speakers, because it's mostly nonverbal. And the thing about it is it's used mostly for placement into gifted and talented programs. Things like high IQ societies will require you to test 99% or higher on a COGAT. So it's created this whole world, because originally people thought, well, it's more like almost IQ. You can't prep for it, but all things, it's been proven that you can
prep for it. I've even in COGAT, I'm HE double toothpicks in my house. We were there all summer long, and now it looks like they're going to make my son take it again. So we're going again.
Oh, so you've had experience taking this test.
Yeah. I am intimately now familiar with the COGAT test. And I know that they say that it is supposed to be helpful for people who are English isn't their first language. But I really don't think that's the case. I think it's a completely teachable, trainable test. And what that test measures is how much money your parents have and how much time they're willing to spend with you on it. Because, where Thomas started and where he ended up were 2 very different places. And he's the same kid with the same brain both times.
Wow, you've got proof right in your own household.
Yeah.
So was Thomas taking it for a gifted and talented program to get into?
Yeah. Well, so we moved to the school district, and they actually have a carved out self-contained program that you have to score really high to get into. And then they have 3 other levels of giftedness, and then they provide services based on that. So they tested all the new to district students in the summer, and he almost got into that self-contained program, but that ended up just being kind of right below that, which was fine because he's in a dual language program, and we really wanted him to continue in the dual language program here. But now they're saying that he's going to have to take it again in the fall, that they won't use all those high scores to determine his giftedness. So we're all right, we can raise these scores if you want. We're going again. We went through, but I don't know. It's just, I feel like it's not fair at all to kids whose parents aren't psychologists with testing experience, and don't enjoy kind of beating the system. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, does this sound like SAT, ACT? It sounds similar in a lot of ways.
It's exactly the same, only with pictures. So
yeah, there you go. And another thing people should know, there are 10 levels for this test, and the levels like correspond to really the age of the kid. So like level 9 is designed for someone who's 9 years old, and that's kind of how they've got it set up, that way. Someone in 3rd grade would be level 9, and level 10 is 4th grade, and it kind of goes up like that, And so the different levels correspond with the age of in being in school. And so that's really it. And I won't get more into the nature of the test and the different things that they have with like matrices and numbers and sentence completions and things like that. But I think the important thing, one other thing, the number of questions range from 118 to 176. And the whole thing takes 2 to 3 hours because sections are like 30 to 45 minutes. And then there's administrative time involved. Those are just some basics. But to answer the question, no college cares about your COGAT scores. That's the question. They couldn't care less. Colleges don't care about anything pre-high school. And guess what? They don't care about your PSAT scores either, your PSAT, pre-ACT. Those are preliminary tests. So they don't care about tests you're taking in 11th grade. They don't care about any middle school thing. So a lot of times people they're, in certain areas like in where you're at least, it's a big deal to be identified as gifted. And it's the kind of thing that someone may want to sort of slap on their resume, but it's just not something anybody cares about. And it's actually even to the point where it would be off-putting for you to sort of be mentioning it.
Right.
So I would just completely stay away from anything at all about your COGAT score. And that was the answer. That was the question. So that was question number 1.
All right. Question number 2.
Let's go with question 2.
What is the difference between ED1 and ED2? And this is from Lori, who is a mom in New York.
All right. Great question, Lori. And so first of all, let's explain ED as it differs first from EA, because I constantly get that question all the time. Early decision, early action, I get them confused all the time. So they're similar and they're different. So first of all, they both have early deadlines, early action and early decision. They both have early notification dates, but early decision is binding. You're committing to have to go. You sign something as a student, your parents sign something, your counselor signs something saying you will go. They can't throw you in jail. It's more morally binding than legally binding, but that's ED. EA, early deadline, early notification, but you can still take up until May 1st to, visit other schools, compare financial aid offers, all that. So that's ED versus EA. Now, what's ED1 versus ED2? Well, ED2 is just a later deadline than ED1. And so it's still usually an early application deadline, and then a notification that's a little earlier than regular admissions, and it's binding. And so there's 75 schools right now that have ED2. I looked it up last year when I did this. There were 74, so one other school got added in. And what are these deadlines? Well, you guys heard my rant last week. There's a lot of January 1s out there, which I'm still pissed about. But in most cases, the deadlines are between January 1st and January 15th. But you can't just assume, it's January 1st, it's January 15th, because you'll see everything in there. Babson and Davidson do January 2nd, for example, just to show the variety of dates that's out there. Claremont McKenna does January 5th, okay? And then you have other schools. George Washington's January 5th. Johns Hopkins is January 3rd. There's some January 7th out there. Pomona's January 8th. And there are quite a few January 7th, Santa Clara's January 7th. There's quite a few schools. Rhodes would be an example. Skidmore would be another. Trinity would be another. Both Trinities, Trinity College and Trinity University, are January 15th. So you just don't know what the date's going to be. You got to look it up. University of Chicago, January 4th. Tulane, January 6th. So most of them have deadlines between January 1st and January 15th. Could be anywhere in there. However, there are a few exceptions. Occidental, February 1. Reed, December 20th. Rensselaer, December 15th. So there are a few, 3 exceptions of the 75 that don't have January dates. Mostly, though, between January 1st, January 15th. Now, I know people are probably wondering, why would a school even have a second round of early decision? All this seems confusing to me. Why even do it? To begin with. So let's talk about that, because that's important. Well, first of all, it is so valuable in admissions if you can lock a student in and know they're coming. How's it helpful? Well, it helps avoid under-enrollment. It helps avoid over-enrollment, because you've got some people slotted in, so you only have to figure out for a smaller number who's coming. It's going to lower your admissions rate, which increases your brand, right? Because if less people fill up spots, then when the masses come,
right,
they're all applying for less slots. Because keep in mind, there's no school in the country that has more early decision applicants than regular. Everybody gets substantially more regular decision applicants than early. So it's going to decrease your work in an admission office if you've locked up half your class. And so why have a second round? Well, it can attract diamonds in the rough. Okay, people who overshot the first time, and now they're maybe a little bit more reasonable, and they can apply. Most schools with that January 1 sequencing are intentionally doing that, or January 15th or 7th or 9th or February, whatever, are intentionally set up so that you could apply early decision to one place. By December 15th, find out you're not getting in. You still have 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe more to turn around and do another early decision applicant. They don't want to miss access to that pool. I was talking with a family I'm working with at a highly selective New York City private school. And I'm not going to mention the name, but they said our counselors tell every student, have an ED2 score ready in case you don't get in your ED1. Now, that's a New York City private school that costs $60,000, okay? Listen, why is it that so many people don't do this? Because you're making a commitment without seeing the price tag. And for most people, they're just not comfortable with that. And so, but that's also one reason why schools like ED can attract some full pay families that you can use for your budget. And then they can use regular admissions to broaden out and get a little bit more geographic diversity. I'm not trying to, and racial and ethnic and socioeconomic. I'm not saying they don't go for kids that need large offers in ED, because they do. The whole Quest Bridge and Posse programs are all set up that way. But it's a fact that more affluent families apply ED, and schools know that they need that for their budget, and that's not something that's lost on them. So what's in it for the applicant? Well, you have a higher acceptance rate. Usually you have peace of mind of knowing where you're going. You get to enjoy your senior year. If you know where you're going, you can start planning in advance, knowing how you're going to live. One thing you should know, all 75 of these schools that offer it, they're all private. And you might say, why? Why are there no public schools? Well, ED is kind of controversial. It's seen in some circles as advantaging the advantaged. And most public schools feel like it's their mission to serve people of all income levels, and advantaging the advantaged is not something they're comfortable with. Now, the Virginia schools feel differently. The University of Virginia, William & Mary, and Virginia Tech all have ED. But it's very rare. You don't find ED. It's so rare, to see ED within public schools. And the last thing I want to share is ED2 does not actually give you the exact same advantage of ED1. And you might think, well, why is that? Most schools don't release their ED2 rates. It's very rare. They keep this stuff close to the vest.
Yeah.
Emory has been really transparent, and their ED1 acceptance rate is oftentimes as much as 3 or 4 times higher than their ED2 rate. And I've had many conversations, not many, but many is 2 in this case. 2 is not really many, but I've had 2 conversations. Two conversations with different people in their office about why is the ED2 acceptance rate so much higher than the ED1. And I'm going to tell you the reasons they've shared. And then I have had some conversations with other schools who have confirmed this. One, in ED1, you need everybody. It's a blank slate. So you've got someone enthusiastic about coming. You need every type of kid when you're first starting out.
Mm-hmm.
2, a lot of times the ED2 pool is weaker than the ED1 pool. So sometimes people still overshoot. They take a shot, at Columbia, and then they don't get in. And then they think, okay, I didn't get in Columbia, then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go to Bucknell. Well, you weren't a good applicant for Bucknell. So sometimes people overshoot still. They're not able to self-assess. 3, in ED1, you might have filled up half your class. And now you're plugging holes. Now you're looking at, wow, we didn't do well in the Midwest, so we need to take more Midwest kids. Look, we've got a huge gender skew. Look, we're not doing well with, you name your kid with Latinx males, or we're not doing well with students interested in engineering, and so you're plugging holes a lot. And then also, and this is a reason that Emory pointed out, like the regular pool is usually stronger than the early decision pool. People don't like to admit that, but it is. And in first, you're reading everybody and they all look phenomenal. But when you're reading, and when you read ED1, you're reading it by itself. That's all you're reading. in ED2, you are comparing the ED2 applicants to the people in regular admission. You're reading those files at the same time. So you're getting compared to all the like massive amounts of apps that come in and all these superstars. So it's just harder to stand out. So any comments at all? I think that hopefully answers the question.
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think ED and ED1 and ED2 are great options, but you have to know what you're doing. And I think you really explain that so people know, what kind of risks they're taking and what their chances are.
Yeah, I would say they're right for some kids and not right for others. And it's okay to do it at some schools and not others.
Right.
Depending on how much of a factor money plays
Mm-hmm.
and depending on how much research you've done on the school.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we have a whole new interview, and it's one I think you're really going to enjoy. It's Lisa Keegan, the VP of Enrollment at Bucknell, and we're talking about the importance of fit when building a college list. In part one, Lisa gives her backstory, where she grew up, how she got into admissions, various jobs she's had. Then Lisa answers the question, what does a student need to know about themselves before embarking on their college search? Lisa then shares some of the common places where students start their search that are often ill-advised. And finally, I asked Lisa how a student can focus on fit when there's so much pressure on them to focus on prestige. And Lisa gives us some sage advice. Listen and enjoy. Friends, we're here with Lisa Keegan from Bucknell University. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, so are we. And we always like our guests to start out by telling us your backstory, really where you grew up, various admission jobs you've had, and anything else that's kind of important to you that you feel like sharing. So take it away.
Thanks so much. So I grew up in Ohio outside of Cleveland and made my way to Elon University for undergrad. And like many students in the undergraduate experience in my senior year, I had a moment of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do after I graduate? And really reflected on what I loved most about college and what I could see myself doing. And I was that tour guide that worked, all through college and thought I love admissions. And lo and behold, a position opened up in Elon's office in my home state, recruiting in Ohio and Pennsylvania, my current home state. And it was, I went all in. In fact, I actually turned down 2 job offers waiting to
in
try
admissions?
to get me.
Were those in admissions?
No,
Okay.
other areas, but I really was, praying that admissions position would come through, and it did. So after 2 years out on the road recruiting prospective students, I did a total shift and actually went to law school.
Wow, that's a shift.
A big shift. And when I was in law school, I had one of those moments, those really powerful mentoring moments with a professor over coffee. And he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't want to practice law, do you?" And I exhaled. and he said, "You should go back into higher ed. You came from higher ed. Have you thought about going back?" And that completely changed my career trajectory and what I wanted to do. I ended up back at Elon working in the president's office for 4 years and got a call from the president on a Saturday morning. And he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Sit down." And he asked if I would take an interim role as Dean of Undergraduate Admissions. And I had very little enrollment experience, but I knew the institution inside and out. I knew the mission. I could articulate the value. And so I ended up back in enrollment. And after several years of Dean of Undergraduate Admissions, I came here to Bucknell, and I couldn't be happier to be here. But a little bit of perhaps a non-traditional path for a lot of enrollment leaders. Many of us sort of grow up in the profession, and I had a couple of different stints in other areas of the university before I came home and where I'm supposed to be.
Well, that broader lens just, I'm sure, only helps you with your job. And I think the law school part might have been non-traditional, but I think the tour guide story, leader, senior fellow, that whole path is probably the best path you can go on if you know that you want to do admissions, right? A lot of people have that And it makes sense. If you love doing that, then you're going to love the work, full time, not just part time.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, it's going to get a little bit at what we're going to talk about, but it's about recognizing your strengths, what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, connecting to mission that you can relate to and articulate. And, I think, if you look at my career path on paper, it may not make sense to a lot of people, but it makes perfect sense to me. And I've absolutely loved every job that I've had. And I think that's really valuable advice to students in kind of thinking about college, thinking about themselves and being true to who they are, and thinking about what that means and where they are selecting to go.
And that's a perfect segue. So our topic today is the importance of fit when selecting a college. And our regular listeners know I like to ask our thought leaders, what's something that's kind of burning on your heart, you've got some passion for? I just find it makes a better interview. And I think it took Lisa like 1 second to come up with this topic. and it's really, really, really an important one. So let me kick this off, Lisa. Before a student even begins to build their college list, what are some things you feel that they should know about themselves?
Yeah, Mark, I love the framing of that question. What should they know about themselves, right? At this stage in the game, it's not what should you know about every college and university out there. It's having some time to think about, you, the student, and what it is that you want to get out of the college experience. And I think when students start there, they put together a better list. I think actually it takes some of the pressure away from the search process as well. There's so many external voices for students in this process. And, it is about how do they center it around them and what they want to get out of 4 years. The reason I was so passionate about this topic, I've recently, been talking to a couple, parents getting ready to embark on this search process with their students. I chat with a lot of students in this process, whether they're looking at Bucknell or they're, children of friends. And I'm always fascinated how students have arrived at their college list. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it is around selectivity or it's around, just because so-and-so said I should look at it. And I'm always sort of waiting for where is that connection back to you. So several years ago, Gallup put out this great research. It's a little bit dated. It came out in 2014, but it's still so relevant. And what it ultimately said is, it doesn't matter where you go to college. It doesn't matter big, small, selective or not. What matters and leads to outcomes, meaning well-being, good jobs, and well-being postgraduate. It's about what you do there. It's about the experience that you have. It's about that tap on the shoulder moment with a professor who steers you in a particular direction, right? Like happened to me.
Right.
And so I think in order for students to think about that, they have to reflect on who they are, what it is that they want out of that college experience to help them start to frame that list. And I think if they can do that, again, they just have such a more meaningful search experience. And oftentimes, probably the listener's going, well, okay, how do I do that? Oftentimes it does start, very generally, location, size, urban, suburban,
right.
Major, right? Those are all really important components. And a way to get a little bit deeper is start to explore and start to hear what is it this school offers. And then you go, I realize that's actually really important to me. I want to make sure that all the schools I'm looking at have X, whatever it might be. And then I think, from there you start to move through curating a really meaningful list, something that you can get very excited about.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, our recommended resource for this week is a website I check all the time, and it's College Transitions. And, College Transitions has some really, really great information. I use it to generate research because they have curated lists that they come up with of really helpful things. So I gave you last week Hillel as a great source for Jewish students. They've got a great list of 42 great schools for Jewish students based on research with links to their Hillels. Great schools for people going into investment banking. You think I was so smart to know all that early decision stuff, all those states and all that stats? I got that from College Transitions. So check out College Transitions. It's a fantastic website, and I think you'll really like it. I'm actually adding it to the list of recommended resources that I give to all of the students that I work with, because I just find it to be really, really helpful a lot when I'm looking up things. So it's just collegetransitions.com. Yeah, when you shared that quote from Gallup, it reminded me, I used to teach just one class a week on college placement. And I tried to end my class every session by saying, remember, it's not where you go, it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. And at the end, I had everybody like chanting it because, they all knew what I was going to say at the end of every lesson. And I believe that to this day. So that quote from Gallup really resonated with me. I also think that it's really hard for people in the vacuum sometimes to think about, to just even know sort of what size they're looking for, or sometimes even distance from home or culture. And
Right.
It's very helpful if they can just set foot on just a range of different campuses. So, that I'm also director of college counseling at KIPP, and I've given we're off for the month, so I don't work there for this month, but I've given all my rising seniors a project. I've given them like 6 colleges that are all within like 100 miles from Atlanta that are very different.
Yep.
And try to get on those campuses. Then when we start talking about things like, do you want single sex or co-ed, or, private, small, large, urban, suburban, college town, rah-rah, preppy, just the various different cultures, they can get that feel. And so what are your thoughts about how, when people start embarking on the early stages, how they should both create the list and narrow their choices down?
Well, we give the exact same advice. I always tell students, just go on a college tour in your backyard. What is easily accessible to you? And go visit. Even if you don't think that is where you want to be at all, it's the first step. And I think, going on that tour, and now you can do it virtually or in person, right?
Right.
If possible, I think it's great to step foot on a college campus. But yeah, I think that's where not only do you get the sense for the place, the size, the setting, but you start to hear terminology, right? That, study abroad, civic engagement, specialized leadership programs, where I think that helps students look beyond just the major and think about the deeper experience that they want to have there. And I think it's about, exactly to your point, go to lots of, or at least a handful of a few different kinds of institutions. Students often embark on this process and have in their mind exactly what they think college is and where they think they want to go. And oftentimes that is formed by an experience that they've had, perhaps athletics, perhaps where a family member went, a cousin, whomever. And it really takes stepping foot on that campus and thinking about it, again, about their own experience, not anybody else's, but about their own. And I think, that's where they can take one aspect and start to expand that list. So let's say, for instance, they realize, okay, this school's really good at study abroad.
Right.
That's important to me, right? Then I'm going to start looking at that at other schools. Or this school had a major that I had never heard of. Who else has that? And so that might be a way to start, forming that list. I think in those experiences too, particularly with big or small, that's where a student, perhaps for the first time, realizes or asks themselves, what kind of environment am I going to learn best in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can I do a big lecture hall? Is that going to work for me? I can navigate that. Or no, I'm going to do much better with an interactive classroom experience that's hands-on, smaller, conversational, I think that is really important to consider when you're thinking about size. And I can tell you from my own search experience and a lot of people around me, that's not always the first question. How do I learn?
Right.
In what environment am I going to learn
Or the
best?
second or the third either.
Exactly. But it really should be front and center. And again, thinking about where you're going to thrive, because that's what this should be about.
So this is a really hard question, and I'm going to ask it to you because I wrestle with it myself. So from my experience, I find students and parents are really greatly influenced by 4 factors that are all somewhat sort of prestige related. College rankings is one, acceptance rates is another, average test scores. And then I'd say, what are other students and adults in their network thinking about a school? So they bounce names off people and they either get, oh, that's a great school, or no reaction. And it sort of creates this little pecking order in their mind. And then you actually mentioned a 5th one, which is actually really important, which is sort of family tradition as well. So how can families or students or families both stay focused on fit when there's so much pressure coming at them to focus on prestige?
I've talked with students that have made their college lists based on prestige, or have made their final college decision and said, it was the best school I got into, which may be okay. But again, my instinct and reaction is, but does it have everything that you want? Are you going to be able to access the kinds of opportunities that you're looking for there? Or did you pick it solely based on the name? I'm going to steal a piece of advice that I actually heard a colleague and friend provide to families. And it's the best piece of advice that I've ever heard related to this question.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ignore the cocktail party banter. That is not what this is about. It is not about bragging rights.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about collecting acceptances. This is really thinking about what is the best place for the next 4 years, that is going to help you figure out what you're excited about, what you want to do for the rest of your life, that's going to set you up for that well-being. Again, tied back to that Gallup research. To me, that's what it has to be about. And, we want students to come to our college campuses and be happy and realize and feel like they made the right choice for them. And so it is, in some way, shape, or form, it's tuning that out to the best of your ability. And I think it is talking with people, trusted advisors in this process who know you. That's key. I think that's just absolutely critical, particularly for students that are influenced by all of these different voices and expectations. How do you kind of tune that out and sit down with someone who really knows you very well and talk out your thought process? And a lot of times that's through college counseling, and we know students don't always have access to that. But who is that friend, that teacher, that mentor? Obviously parents can play that role. Who can really help you say, is this really going to be the best environment for you?
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Okay, friends, really excited about this college spotlight. I'll share something I've never talked about on the podcast. A lot of our regular podcast listeners knew I grew up in Ontario, Canada, but we actually lived in 3 different places. I lived in Kingston, Ontario until I was 2, and then we moved to a place called St. Catharines from 2 to 7, and then, Dave, the place you hung out the most, Port Rowan and Simcoe from 7 to 18. But St. Catharines is right on the border of New York State, right by Niagara Falls and right by Buffalo. So for us, the big city all the time growing up that was close by would be Buffalo. It was literally 15 minutes away. And so we're talking about Buffalo Day. There's a lot of things I'll say in here that just bring back a lot of memories from my childhood. So I had to get that little childhood reference in there, Dave. You know those connections.
Absolutely. Write down the Queen EW.
There you go. Yep. There's another one. So the first thing I'll say is there are a lot of names for Buffalo. Like I like to call it SUNY Buffalo, reflecting the fact that it's in one of the 64 schools in the SUNY system. But that's not what most people call it. Most people either call it the University at Buffalo, or most commonly, those who go there just call it UB. So I'm going to be in the moment, and I like the succinctness and the brevity of it. So throughout the rest of this, I'll pretend I'm a Buffalo student, and we'll just call it UB, which is what it's affectionately known as. And as I mentioned, UB is a SUNY school. Now, what is SUNY? SUNY is an acronym for the State University of New York, and it is the largest, most comprehensive system of universities, colleges, and community colleges in the United States. It's actually even more comprehensive than the Cal State system in California. There are 425,000 students, and then there are over 2 million adult learners spanning 64 campuses. And a lot of people don't know this, little known fact, but Buffalo is the second largest city in New York, second only, of course, to the Big Apple. And New York was actually one of the very last states to come up with their own state university system, which is a little surprising, given the fact that it's been sort of on the vanguard of education for a long time. But it was established in 1948 by the governor, Thomas Dewey. And even to this day, the governor has a lot of control over the state legislative board, appointing almost all of the board of directors, board of trustees that oversee the whole entire system. But there's a huge variety of colleges within the SUNY system. Some schools have specialties in areas like, forestry and other areas, but they divide the whole SUNY system up into 4 distinct categories. They're what are known as university centers, with doctoral granting institutions, comprehensive colleges, technology colleges, and community colleges. And then there are also some what are called statutory colleges, which are state-funded colleges within 2 private schools, the 2 private schools being Alfred University and Cornell. But when it comes to these, the university system, the big ones, the big giant ones we're talking about, the university centers, there are 4 of them. And these are, arguably the most famous of the 4 SUNYs. They're huge, giant conglomerates that have almost every imaginable major you could want. And those 4 are Binghamton, Stony Brook, University of Albany, and University of Buffalo. In fact, SUNY is New York is really one place that doesn't really have one flagship. It's got these 4 university centers, and you'll hear debates between Binghamton, Stony Brook, Albany, and Buffalo. What is the flagship? And most commonly, you'll hear it be Buffalo or Stony Brook. All right, so a little bit more about these 4 schools in particular before we jump into UB. So some unique distinctions, let's say, about Buffalo within this group. In terms of acreage, it's got the second most within this group. As far as date of founded, it's the second oldest, going back to 1846. As far as enrollment, it's the largest. Endowment, it's the largest. Operating budget, it's the largest. And it's the only one that plays FBC football, which, remember a while ago, Dave, they broke it down from Division I to Division II and then went with FBS and FCS for football. So, yeah, so it's, UB is the only one that plays at the highest level when it comes to college football of the schools. Now, one of the really unique things about New York, and I got so excited when this happened about 5 years ago now, is that New York State agreed to offer free tuition for all public colleges and universities for families with incomes of $125,000 or less. You have to be a resident of the state. And we haven't talked about this much on here, but something I've wanted to talk about. It's a program called the Excelsior Scholarship. And, you do need to make a commitment to stay in the state for a few years after graduating. They want to recoup their investment. It's actually a smart plan. It's kind of like what the Hope Scholarship has done in Georgia, and what so many other programs like Bright Futures in Florida have done to keep your talent home rather than have your talent migrate down to places like North Carolina and Georgia. When it comes to research funding, Buffalo is one of the most by far. This is a major research institution. All right. And as far as sports rivalry, this is some of my biggest memories growing up. One of my dad's good friends, a teacher, he used to take Norm and I all the time to go to UB basketball games. And it used to be like a real highlight for us every year. And so they've got a couple rivalries that are really well known. And the big rivalry would be against Crosstown School Canisius, which is another private school, literally like 2.5 miles away. The other big rivalry is Niagara University, which is in Lewiston. But Canisius and Lewiston, and those are the big, huge rivalries. Dave, you are going to love the nickname of UB. Any idea what it is?
Oh, it's probably like Arnie the Buffalo or something.
Well, I'm going to give you one hint. This is my one hint. Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. Okay. The Bulls.
You got it.
The Bulls?
I knew you'd get it if I said that. They are the Bulls. They are the Bulls.
Okay.
Now you're loving them a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about some more distinctions, particularly about UB within the SUNY system. It is New York's largest, most comprehensive public research university. UB is the only school within the whole 64 schools in the SUNY system that has a law school. They also are the only school that has an accredited pharmacy program. Now, let's talk about the campus, because campus is a little unique here. So they've got 3 campuses. So you've got the North Campus, which is actually not in Buffalo. It's in a Buffalo suburb called Amherst. It's only 3 miles from Buffalo, though. This is where your core courses are. This is over 1,000 acres, over 100 buildings, lakefront residential settings. This is where your main academic buildings form a long stretch of buildings that UB students refer to as the spine. And overall, UB has 8 libraries, but the biggest one, Silverman, is here, and Cape and Hall, which is the heart of the campus. Then you go over to the South Campus. There's a little bit of housing on South. Most of the housing is really on North. South's an historic neighborhood. Here you've got your restaurants, your shops. This is the place with the classic architecture, the ivy-colored buildings. This is in Buffalo, and this is home to the School of Public Health, Pharmacy, Dental, Medicine, and Nursing, as well as Architecture and Planning. And they do have their own transportation system. Then you have the downtown campus. Now, this is the one that's undergone the most renovations, like multi-million dollars of renovations. This is where the Jacobs School of Medicine is. This is located in the Theater District, and what often people refer to as the Medical Corridor. And there are enclosed walkways. So for people like me, weather weenies, these enclosed walkways and tunnels, they cover most of the North Campus and the academic building to keep me from dying from the cold. Because anybody knows, Buffalo is not a joke when it comes to weather. They also have a bus system known as UB Stampede, and this takes students back and forth between North and South Campus. So that's something else to keep to be aware of. One of the things UB is known for is learning by doing. So there's a huge focus on study abroad, internships, volunteerism, and teaching. And they actually study abroad at 5 times the national average for a school of their size. Now, one thing I love, Dave. Dave, you ever heard are you a Best Buy person?
Yeah, well, I used to until Best Buy no longer sells, video game. Well, it's video games and so forth. But I used to go to Best Buy.
Okay, because that's like my place. That's where I get all my computers, all that stuff. Our whole family gets everything there. So Best Buy has something called the Geek Squad.
Oh, yes.
You know about the Geek Squad?
Yes. That's why its stock is up, because they've gone into service, which is smart.
Oh, I got to give you. You're such a Renaissance man. You got rid of your stocks to buy real estate, but you still keep up with stocks. Good for you.
Well, actually, interesting enough, I think the Geek Squad has this $199 a year program where they will be your personal Geek Squad and take care of all of your home electronic equipment, even if you did not buy it from Best Buy. So that's something you should check out.
Well, I've been researching their stock ever since I learned about that, because with this whole work at home movement,
yeah,
it's got really, really been powerful, right? Because I can tell you, as somebody that works for home now I started working at home the year before the pandemic, so it's been about 2.5 years, and I absolutely love it. I mean, I work at home, obviously, for School Match for You, but I'm talking about for KIP. I do that there as well. The biggest frustration for me is when technology goes bad. Before, I could just call the director of technology over and he'd fix everything. Now I've got a real quagmire. So I say all that. You're like, where are you going, Stuck? Where are you going with this? So UB does something really cool. They have the Tech Squad. And like the Geek Squad, they will come to you wherever you are at no charge. Of course, as my guy that does our lawn says to me when I say that, Mark, there's always a charge. It's just built in other places. right? It's built-in tuition, but there's no explicit charge. They'll come to you wherever you're on campus and fix your computer. And to me, that was like heaven opening up when I heard that. They're one of the very few schools in the country that has both a school of urban planning, a school of pharmacy, a school of architecture, and a school of law. Now, their whole university is divided into 13 schools or colleges. So I'll briefly say what they are. There's a school of architecture and planning, the School of Arts and Sciences, the School of Dental Medicine, which, by the way, is really strong, School of Education, Engineering and Applied Sciences, School of Law, School of Management. There's a Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. There's a School of Nursing, School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, School of Public Health and Health Professions, School of Social Work, and then they have the Roswell Park Cancer Institute, which is a graduate division. So there's a lot there. Now, some of the really strong majors, they have a lot of them. Architecture would definitely be one. Biochemistry, really biology and biological sciences. Biotechnology, exercise physiology and kinesiology. Pharmacology and toxicology. Accounting, business management, international business. Speech, communication, and rhetoric. And then probably if I had to pick one they're most known for, this is like where their reputation is international, is computer information systems and computer science. So oftentimes when I'm interviewing students that are really interested in computer science, either I'll put this school on their list or they'll put it on the list for me. They'll come to me with it on the list already. But because of the Excelsior Scholarship and because of a lot of things, this is a school, like if I talk to students about UB in, let's say, Florida or California, or even Chicago, it's not really known at all, really. It flies under the radar. But within New York, it's a powerhouse. It's a powerhouse in Western New York and New York City. And this is, well, you know what? I'll wait. I'll hold my fire till I get to stats. Other strong programs, it is engineering. They have almost everything imaginable that you could want in engineering. They've got aerospace, aeronautical. They've got bioengineering, biomedical, chemical, civil, computer, electrical. They've also got environmental engineering, industrial engineering, material science, mechanical, nuclear, structural, systems engineering. So they got all of that stuff. So that's definitely a strength. Linguistics is a strength. And then audiology. They have a very strong speech language pathology program. And then, of course, nursing, very strong nursing school as well. So overall, I would say still those would be some of the most well-known programs. Psychology, I'm sure would be mad that I didn't mention them. And then within the arts, film and media studies would be the strongest program within the arts. They also have something which is really cool. They have over 40 combined dual degree programs. You can get like a BS and an MBA, over 40 of these programs, which is awesome. Usually like 5-year programs, but it varies depending on the program. And they do let you design your own major. Now, arguably the biggest criticism of UB is that it's just grown so big that students, especially freshmen, fall through the cracks with large classes. And like most public schools, students can struggle sometimes to get classes unless they're in an honors program. They do have an honors program at UB as well. This is something that this administration has really taken up recently as a top priority, and they've done a few things to address this. They've really beefed up their advising, and they've launched a program called UB Finish in 4 campaign. So it's designed to, finish in 4 years. Now, some of the overlap schools would be the University of Pittsburgh, Rutgers, outside of New York, and of course, all the other SUNY schools. And Dave, you ready for something lighthearted?
Okay.
Guess what their favorite pastime is? I'm not going to ask you to guess because you'll never guess, but I'll tell me it's a rhetorical. Ooze Fest. Ooze Fest. Now, you would think Ooze Fest, is that like Booze Fest, right? Is that like where the beer is just gushing down your face? No. Ooze Fest is this big tradition at UB. It happens in the spring, and students participate, faculty participate, alumni come back. Everybody dresses up in costumes, and what do? They play mud volleyball all day. Doesn't sound like my kind of idea of fun.
I think I'll pass on that one.
You know what? I'll pass two, but I got to give it to them for creativity and just letting their hair down and letting loose. But I had the same thought. I'll pass on getting muddy all day playing volleyball. But for them, they love it. There's wheelbarrow races. Didn't sell you on News Fest, Dave.
No, can't say that's a tradition that is going to go viral. I don't think so.
Now, as far as local attractions, of course, you've got Niagara Falls literally a few miles away, so you can imagine that's one of the wonders of the world. That's a huge draw. Trips to Toronto, huge draw. New York City, huge draw. And then the university provides transportation because you have really nice ski slopes and ski resorts close by, and the university provides transportation to the ski resorts. So, Dave, before I get to stats, what popped off the page for you?
Good engineering courses, good architecture, and yes, it is close to Toronto, an hour and a half. So it's in a nice region of the country.
Dave would get his little hometown in there. Dave finds a way intertwining Toronto in there.
That's right.
So let me tell you, let's do stats. So it's a big school. This is a big comprehensive school. Like I said, the most comprehensive public school in New York State. So 21,921 undergrads, another 10,000 grad and professional students. So bringing the total student body to just a tad under 32,000. After last week, Dave and I talked about the dearth of men on college campuses. Well, UB is an exception to that. 56% male.
Oh, wow.
And 44% female. And my theory on that is just the strength of engineering and computer science, which continue to be male-dominated professions. But, I don't know that for sure, but that's my theory. So there's a lot of schools you see, and Dave, UB to me comes front to mind when I think of this. It's not really that well known nationally, but locally it's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And when you see the stats, you'll see why. So of all the students at UB, 13.9% come from international countries. Check this stat. Only 1 to 2% come from 49 other states, and 85% are from New York.
Wow.
And that's partly because New York's a big state. It's partly because they know how good the school is. The local reputation is so strong. And then once again, this is why you put something like an Excelsior program in, where if you make under 125, you pay no tuition, right?
Yeah.
It's really key. Really keeps the locals home.
Yes. And that is huge. I mean, that really is. Especially, realistically, if you are going into engineering or nursing, even if you're going to skills like medicine, we all know that the college makes no difference whatsoever in terms of your future earning potential or even to ranking of prestige. You're going to be an engineer. You're going to be a nurse. And if you can go through and get it into a great program and have absolutely no college debt, that just becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah, and sometimes I think I've thrown the stat out before that there are now 20 colleges in the country that offer some form of free public tuition. But in the overwhelming majority of those cases, that's community college. There are very few programs that are offering free tuition for four-year publics for people making, which is, twice the national average, 125,000. So pretty generous program. It's actually smart. If we're going to make that investment in you, then you need to stay in our state for a few years, or you know what, you can pay it back, because that's what happens. If you leave the state right away, well, you just converted your grant to a loan.
Yeah.
But I think that's fair. I don't think there's, everybody knows the rules going in there. I think that's fair. Let's look at the diversity, because this isn't quite California, which is just literally incredible diversity within both the UCs and the CSUs. But it is very diverse school. So 47% white, 18% Asian, 13.9% international, 9.8% black, 8.5% Hispanic Latino, and the international students, there are over 4,000 of them. So really, really pretty diverse.
That is a very nice stats.
Yeah, and when you look at the programs, I mean, like I said, this is a research university, okay? And they put a huge focus on research. Their research dollars are really impressive. So as far as programming, 220 different master's programs and 95 different doctoral programs. Okay, let's talk about research funding. I mentioned. I'll just let you see how Buffalo stacks up within the SUNY system. So Binghamton getting $76 million in research funding. Albany, 137. Stony Brook, 225. Buffalo, $387 million in research funding. And so that ranks 56th of all schools in the country as far as federal research dollars that you get to work on research projects. So, 56 is pretty, kind of a lot when you think there's 4,000 schools in the country. So they're in the top 1.5% of schools in the country when it comes to the most research funding dollars that they get. A little more stats, 34% live on campus. Not a big frat school, sorority school, 2% of men in frats, 2% of women in sororities, 86% freshman retention, 4-year grad rate, 58.2. Remember, the national averages are low 40s, so substantially higher than the national average on grad rates, 71.6% 5-year, 75.2% 6-year. Median GPA, 3.61. Acceptance rate, 61%. Yield, for those of you who aren't regular listeners, yield is a mathematical percentage. It looks at the students that you admit and do they come. So the yield is 22%. And meaning 22 out of every 100 students who get an admission offer choose to come to the school. And as far as testing, just to get a sense of the students, the middle 50% of the ACTs at 24 through a 29. Middle 50% on evidence-based reading and writing, which is like your English writing section on the SAT, 570 to 650, and math, 590 to 690. And for costs of the school, out of state, this is obviously cost of attendance, literally every penny you spend, including entertainment and transportation and the pizza and the Uber ride and everything, between 46 and 47K. In-state, between 28 and 29. They do have merit scholarships as well. They average between 4,000 and 5,000. So that's UB, SUNY Buffalo, or the University at Buffalo. Final comments, Dave?
Well, it's very interesting. I was reading an article saying that upstate New York, since the pandemic, has had a renaissance because as people have fled New York, what they realize about upstate New York is, yeah, the weather can be quite harsh, but it's absolutely beautiful up there. Most people don't realize that they had the Olympics in the latter part of the last century.
Sure.
Lake Placid is up there.
Yep.
It's got great skiing. And actually, it's climatically quite stable. It does not get hurricanes. It does not get wildfires. It does not get tornadoes. And so, when you look at the trends of global warming, when Miami is underwater, everybody's going to be flocking to Buffalo to get a sight of the beach.
Well, let me throw a couple more things in there, Dave. One is cost of living's really good.
Yeah.
When it comes to housing, we know how important that is. You're always talking about that. And the other thing is that Buffalo as a city is really taking a page from Pittsburgh. We all know Pittsburgh was the steel town, and it's transformed itself into a tech center and into a medical center. And that's exactly what Buffalo's doing. I mean, they've, the renovations that are happening downtown. I mean, the multi-millions they're putting into that downtown campus, into the medical complex, and they're already known internationally as a supercomputing school. So they're going in that direction of computer science and a medical center. And so that leads to lots and lots of jobs within those industries. This is a really, really strong school. Now, a lot of times for my out-of-state students, it's not the sexiest location for most people. Like most people out of state don't come to me and say, I want to go to college in Buffalo. I'm just being honest. But I appreciate you bringing up the fact that there's a lot more there than people think is there. But this is oftentimes a school that can be a really good school on your list that, depending on how strong you are as a student, might be a good probable for you. I mean, the academic profile is above the national average, but you don't need straight A's to get in. And like I said, I mean, you said it well, Dave. You come out of here with an engineering degree, computer science degree, nursing, you go in the pre-med, the dental track, and so many other majors, speech pathology, you are not going to have any issue getting a job.
People might not have realized it, but Toronto passed Chicago several years ago to become the third largest city in Canada and North America. It's bigger than Chicago by several 100,000. Moreover, while Chicago is quite static at this point, Toronto is growing at over 100,000 people per year. It's an absolutely fantastic city, and you're literally an hour and a half away. You cross the border and go down a a highway called Queen Elizabeth Highway, and it takes you right into Toronto.
Man, if you give this much love to Toronto when I'm talking about Buffalo, I can't even imagine if we do a spotlight on UT, University of Toronto, man. You're going to be bouncing off the walls over there, man.
That's right. Well, the advantage of that Buffalo, too, is you and I know, Mark, you can't afford to live in Toronto anymore, but Buffalo is still dirt cheap. So you can have the day trips into Toronto and not pay the $1 million housing prices to experience.
Well, in fairness, Dave, I mean, you are right, though. Like a lot of people in Buffalo, one of the big highlights are jaunts to Toronto. Because you're literally talking an hour 40 minutes. And like you said, straight shot on the QEW highway, which, So there you go. Another underrated jewel. They're my favorite spotlights to throw out there. These ones that I think fly under the radar. There's so much attention on these 25 or 30 schools in the country that people like hers are fighting to get into. And in some cases, they're appropriate depending on the strength of the student and the interests of the student. But there are the overwhelming majority of schools are jewels like this. Here's a school, top 1.5% in all the country in research funding, pretty much every imaginable major you could ever want. And I really like, Dave, those 40 dual degree programs they have, because you can literally get in and get out and get a master's in 5 years. And,
and it's got a very, very solid medical school for all you pre-med.
No, it really does. And they've been just putting money there into their whole medical complex like crazy. So Dave usually knows those med schools, by the way.
Yes.
Have some connection. So awesome. So next week we're going to transition. Lisa and I just completed several college visits in North Carolina. So you're going to get a little dose of North Carolina for a while, and then we'll spread out and go around the rest of the country.
Awesome. Go Bulls.
As long as it's not Jordan.
That's right. Next week in the news, the case for the college exit exam. Another article by Douglas Belkin of the Wall Street Journal. We have two questions from listeners next week. Question number one, now that most schools are test optional, is there any advantage to taking the SAT or ACT exam to get merit money? A great question from Elizabeth from California. Our question number two is, Mark, you mentioned in a previous episode the percentage of kids choosing certain essay prompts on the Common Application. Where did you get the data? And our interview is part 2 of 2 with Lisa Keegan, the Vice President of Enrollment at Bucknell University, on the importance of fit when selecting colleges. And our college spotlight comes to you from the Research Triangle of Raleigh, North Carolina, and is the all-women's college, Meredith College.
Shout out to my cousin Sarah, who graduated from Meredith. By the way, Dave, this is the last time I'm probably going to use my portable sound booth. Not my portable sound booth, my pillow fort, which I created. You notice I haven't been under the blankets lately, Yeah. There's so many comments about that. People sent in, I'm listening to your blanket episode. You don't need to do that anymore. They sent me all these ideas. It was pretty funny.
Your poor wife says, my husband's truly regressing. He's got a pillow fort.
Well, it's really neat. I just pull together 4 really big pillows. I'll be really honest with you. If I knew how well this pillow fort, I'm happy with my sound quality ever since I went to it. I might not have sprung for the portable sound booth, but I sprung for it. I bought all the materials, like $500 to $600, and now you know me. I have zero skills, Dave. So Joy told me about this really, really cool app where you can just go on and punch in your whatever you need, and somebody will come to your house and set up your furniture and do everything like that. And so that's what's happening in an hour and 15 minutes. 2 guys are coming over here, and they're setting everything up for me because I don't have skills like you.
You called pillowfort.com, and they're coming to the rescue.
The app is called TaskRabbit.
TaskRabbit. Yeah, TaskRabbit. I know that one. Yes.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's how some of these people become like multimillionaires in Silicon Valley, come up with an idea like that and then get all these workers. And, of course, you get your little cut because it's your idea, your software platform. And, of course, they start out with little things like we'll put furniture together. Next, they're doing moves. I was looking. Literally, there's options in there like we'll run chores for you. Like you have like 30 options when you go on there. So American entrepreneurship. I love it. All right, BIPOC. See you next week.
Take care of my BIPOC friend.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.